keep its minorities. So you don't just have to be Hindu to continue to live in India. You could be any other religion, including Muslim, and still happily live. They didn't boot out their minorities and other religions. But Pakistan was a theocracy. It was very clear. I think they ended up taking a very tiny amount of Hindus who were already living in those regions because they did a population exchange, but you can only go so far, and many continued remaining there. And today that population has dwindled to 2%, which is quite a worry. So this was a situation, and you sort of uh, had this narrative, and that was how Pakistan was formed. So every princely state, there were about 500 states in India. They were all given this opportunity to, do you want to merge with India, or do you want to merge with Pakistan, or do you want to be independent? This was in 1947, right after independence. So around right after August. You'll be surprised to know that not one of those 500 plus states wanted to go independent, which says a lot. And uh, 545 odd um, agreed to go with India. I think it is very telling of what India was, the living conditions, what as a society, as a people, and it was going to be a democracy anyway. So 99% of all the states that were asked chose to go with India. There were a few, 4 or 5 states that Muslim majority, they decided to become what is Pakistan. And anyway, Kashmir was predominantly, it has been Hindu for over 5,000 years, but by design, several decades ago, they kind of changed the demographic of that region, and it was overwhelmingly Muslim majority. And Pakistan just assumed that Kashmir, being a Muslim majority state, would merge with Pakistan. So they had asked the leader of Kashmir at the time, Raja Hari Singh, do you want, you have to make a decision. Do you want to go with India, or do you want to go with Pakistan? Now, the Raja was leaning towards India, but he just wanted a little bit more time to kind of think about it and come up with a decisive answer. But Pakistan couldn't wait, and when it realized that it wasn't jumping on the chance of merging with Pakistan, it feared that it might actually lose Kashmir, and that would be a slap in the face of their own narrative, because the very nature of their existence is that Muslim majority states should move with Pakistan. I mean, that's the whole premise of why they're formed, right? A home for the Indian Muslims. That's what Pakistan is. But when it realized that Kashmir was not going to merge with it, it sent some of its militants and some of the local tribal people and the Pakistani army to Kashmir. It essentially invaded Kashmir, and that's when this Raja of Kashmir, the leader of Kashmir, went to Indian government and said, "We need your help. We're being invaded." And the Indian government very smartly said, "We will help you. We'll send our army. We'll defeat these invaders. However, only after you sign merging. You have to, of course, promise that you're going to merge with India, or else why would we put our troops at risk?" And there was an agreement. As soon as the agreement was signed, the troops were being sent. And so there was an instrument of accession which was signed on 26th of October, 1947. This is the official document which merges Kashmir with the Union of India. So with this statement and this document, Kashmir merged with India, and it's as a part of India as any other Indian state. But for 73 years, for some reason, Pakistan has kind of internationalized and politicized this narrative that Kashmir belongs to Pakistan, or that Kashmir wants to be independent and India is not letting it be independent. But the truth is far from this narrative, right? I mean, that document the instrument of accession, and every diplomat in the world knows about this, that there was this accession that happened. So Pakistan has zero moral and legal claim on Kashmir, but I cannot believe that for 73 years it has sort of gone on and kind of spread this narrative. So anyway, the troops were sent, the Indian troops were sent. They defeated the Pakistani army, and they kind of pushed them back. As they didn't push them back all the way to what was technically Pakistan. There's a very small region that, because they were asked to retreat, and they should not have been asked to retreat. They should have gone all the way, pushed them out, and stake their claim, and that would have been the international border, and that would have been, we would have no problems today. But what happened is a very tiny part of Kashmir today is illegally occupied by Pakistan. It's called POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir, and that is illegally occupied Kashmir. And I think the UN and all these foreign entities know that, but they have not. They need to leave that land. And so that's one issue. So on August the 5th, in 2019, the Indian government made a very decisive and poignant political decision to reverse a article in the Indian Constitution. So right after this merging of Kashmir in 1947, they had appointed a chief minister called Sheikh Abdullah. This chief minister, he was Muslim. He introduced a very discriminatory, kind of unfair article into the constitution. He said, I want Kashmir to have its own flag, anthem, and its own constitution. And this was called Article 370. It gives Kashmir a special status. It was supposed to only be very temporary and transient, something that was like just upon merging, it was supposed to be introduced for a very short amount of time until people kind of settle down, and then it was supposed to be eliminated. And for 73 years, it was not eliminated. No government had the political will to kind of get rid of it. It was not a fair article because it cut Kashmir off from the rest of India. So even though Kashmir is part of India, it's an Indian state, this article kind of gives it autonomy in a way where you can't buy property if you're not Indian. The rest of you can't be a citizen of India from another state and buy property in Kashmir. You can't vote in their elections and so on. So it really isolated in a very, and Kashmir suffered. They got development money, but so many other things they didn't get, foreign investment they didn't get. And part of that Article 370 was another article which was very sexist, racist, and discriminatory to women, LGBT, people of other religions. And it's called Article 35A. And it was, very briefly, it was an article where a Kashmiri woman, if she married a non-Kashmiri man, she would lose her property and inheritance and state rights. However, a Kashmiri man, he could marry some American lady, and that lady could suddenly gain property, inheritance, and state rights. So it actually discriminated against women. And because it's an Islamic state, there was factions of Sharia kind of. They didn't have to listen to Indian Constitution, which uses a universal law, and Indian Constitution is secular. So Kashmir had basically, it could have Sharia law, which it was having, and men were having 4 wives, and there were all kinds of things that would not be allowed in India, but they were allowed in Kashmir because of this special status, and including LGBT, of course, is not recognized under Sharia law. The LGBT community in Kashmir was heavily marginalized. So on August the 5th, the Indian government reversed this. They got rid of 370. They said, we get rid of this transient law, which was up for removal anyway. We finally remove it, getting rid of the special status. So Kashmir is on every level, universally, it's a part of India, and we get rid of 35A, which now gives all women equal rights to the men, and it was, there's no religious discrimination going on, and Kashmir is part of India. People from the rest of India can now buy property in Kashmir, and they can live there and open businesses, foreign investment, and so on. So this happened, and suddenly it was so ugly because I was shocked to see that something that should be celebrated, that such a discriminatory article that was removed, was by the Western media, especially the BBC and the Guardian, and some of these kind of far left, leftist kind of outlets. They were painting this picture like India did something bad, like it was a big bully, and it is now disenfranchising and marginalizing Kashmir. It's so ridiculous when you look at the history of it. So there was so much false reporting, and they said that, oh, there's a blackout, and there's no communications going on. Kashmir is under assault, and so on. It's far from the truth. They've sent a lot of troops there because Kashmir is full of terrorists and separatists and militants and insurgencies, and to curb those people, they needed to be some police and law and order, and it was for that reason that they had sent the troops, and there is no official curfew, but people are choosing not to get out on the street or not to stay out because there's all these terrorist elements, jihadi elements out there. So, and Pakistan has made this a political issue. It has zero claim in Kashmir, what happens to Kashmir. And anyway, Kashmir is now an internal matter because after getting rid of this article, I don't know why it took this issue to the UN, and the UN just refuted it and said you have no say in what happens in another country, and Kashmir is not part of Pakistan. I'm sorry, but we are not going to intervene in the way that you're asking us to intervene. And human rights abuse as well. There have been human rights abuses in Pakistan for last 73 years, and there have been genocide and all that. So thankfully, no one has listened to it except some of these uh, kind of far left factions. And I'm sorry to say that the Labour Party in the UK, sadly, they've kind of taken this cause on. And some DNC far left elements have kind of, without understanding and without appreciating the history of Kashmir and how bad this article was for India and for the people of Kashmir, they are kind of taking the side that Indian government has done something bad because they are just they're I think they're over shielding of Islam in a way and sort of overcompensating for that. They're immediately calling out on India for something that it has full right to do for its own people, and also it was something good that was done. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to share with your audience of a little bit of the history and what this article is, because the world is like, what exactly happened in Kashmir? They're clueless, but they're quick to comment on it. So I just wanted to let you know about that.
And what was the spin that you noticed that you didn't agree with? What were they actually saying that that didn't jive with what you had experienced or knew about the situation?
Very, very good question. Thank you for asking me that. Several points. Number one, they were trying to paint a picture that this was done by brute force, that this was basically, it was a case of the prime minister waking up one morning and saying, yep, we're going to scrap Article 370. It's a throw out a presidential order. It's done. The article is scrapped and there's no special status. That's not what happened. This bill, it was a bill. It was passed in Parliament. It was introduced, it was opened in the Parliament, both upper. So India is a true democracy. When we have elections and when we have bills, they are very fair, and people have a fair say. There have been so many bills that would have been right for the country that didn't get passed, and the government didn't intervene because it really is a democracy. So this was a law that was passed in upper and lower house of the Indian Parliament. There was a big vote. Two-thirds majority. It won with a two-thirds majority. That is enormous. I don't think you have too many bills, small bills, that pass with two-thirds majority, which proves that this was something that India and Indian people as a country for 73 years didn't like, because it was unfair. It was very kind of sexist, racist, and discriminatory in many ways, and it had turned Kashmir into an apartheid state in a way, because essentially it was saying Kashmir can rule itself. And every other state can't. And because Kashmir could rule itself, you had a horrible dynast. You had two dynast parties. So for 70 years, it was basically two families that just exchanged power. These were corrupt parties. They were very wealthy. Both of them were Islamic, Muslim leaders who, they were soft separatists. I mean, they didn't say it out in public, but they really had their hopes for a independent Kashmir, which is not even an option, considering it merged with India. So where are you going to go with that? So one was the false narrative was saying that the Indian government kind of pushed or forced this. It didn't. It was it was passed with two-thirds majority. Most parties, most MPs and sort of constituencies voted overwhelming for it. I think it was something that was celebrated by women around the world. It was, I mean, women in India. It was celebrated by LGBT community in India. It was celebrated by minorities in India because, hey, it's fair game now. Everyone gets equal rights now. So that was one issue. It was
Hmm.
misreporting about that. And the second is the point about, oh, it's under lockdown. It's not under lockdown. There is no official curfew. There is no official lockdown. People are choosing not to get out. They're scared that if they're going to go to shops and stuff, they're going to be shot by terrorists. And it's ironic that, and also the some of the outlets, especially BBC and Guardian, I think they've been the worst. They've been saying, oh, there's a human I mean, there's human rights violation in Kashmir. And it's ironic because in the last 30 days, I think there have been two fatalities. Two people have been killed, and even those two have been killed by Pakistani terrorists. None of them have been killed by the armed forces. So they're painting a narrative that the armed forces of India are, they're everywhere, and they're killing innocent people and locking people up, rounding people up. Not true. And then there was also some of these, even BBC had done this. They used footage from several years ago saying that it's happening today in Kashmir, because we could tell why some of the flags, the sayings on the flags, because that was footage that happened when some terrorist was killed in Kashmir, and the separatists were rioting. They were outraged that a terrorist had been killed. I mean, it should be something to be celebrated, but that footage of that riot was circulated on these outlets, and a lot of Indian people called them out on it. They even, I think there needs to be a lawsuit, I feel, because this is defamation, and you're painting a very wrong picture of India. And you're sort of painting a very wrong picture of what is going on there. The reality was that it kind of had become a little ISIS enclave over the past 30 years, where you had, terrorists and separatists who were running for office, and outright they had blatant terrorist the talk. What they were saying was really venomous stuff, and should not be tolerated by any free society. And burning Indian flags, and this goes beyond sedition. But because of that special status, they couldn't they couldn't be tried. They couldn't be kind of arrested.
Hmm.
you know so these were some of the things that were falsely reported. And it's very sad to see, like in the UK, you get this Labour Party that is so misguided on this issue, that they're coming out and sort of kind of voicing this Pakistani false narrative that is baseless. It has no legs to stand on. And yet, and funnily enough, they are very violent and aggressive and very oppressive, because on the Independence Day, which was August 15th, in the Indian High Commission, I think in London, there was a big mob of Pakistani and sort of Sikh separatist goons that had come out of this Indian Commission. People were, there were people who were celebrating the independence. There were peaceful Indians there, but this big mob of, I don't know, I think it was close to 1,000 maybe. They came there, they were aggressive, they were ruly, they were rude. Towards the end of it, they were throwing eggs, they were throwing tomatoes, they were throwing iced water bottles at women, children, and elders. Shameful, shameful. And they even assaulted the London police force, who were there to protect innocent civilians. So I mean, it's so, I mean, in 73 years, they have learned nothing. They have no decency, they have no class. They just continue to harp on an issue that's not even theirs. And basically, they claim that Kashmir is theirs, which is not. Then they claim that Kashmir ought to be independent, which it's not an option. And then they bring up this UN Security Council resolution of 1948, I believe, which is baseless. Because basically there is a UN resolution that they always quote, which they have never read. Not one Pakistani journalist has ever read it, because if they had taken the 5 minutes it takes to read it, they would shut up forever, because this resolution is very clear. It states that if you want a plebiscite in Kashmir, a plebiscite is basically, do you want an independent vote? If you want to ask the people of Kashmir, do they want to be independent? Three things need to happen. Number one, Pakistan needs to withdraw completely from Kashmir because they illegally occupy territories. It needs to withdraw completely. Number two, India needs to reduce some of their, not withdraw, but just reduce some of their forces. And then number three is you need to ask the people of Kashmir, do you want to go with India or Pakistan? There is no third option. There is no independent Kashmir option. Uh, this is the UN resolution. It's very clear. It's three steps and they're sequential. So the second can't be done unless the first is done. So the very first step of this resolution is Pakistan needs to withdraw from India completely, needs to withdraw from Kashmir completely, which it hasn't for 73 years. So when these people go on about even recently, even at the current UN, the United Nations General Assembly meeting is going on right now, and Trump had a meeting with Imran Khan, who is the Pakistani Prime Minister, and there were some bunch of journalists. I mean, I saw a video clip of this, and I started laughing because there were like two of these journalists were asking Trump, oh, what do you think of these UN resolutions? I mean, what's going on in Kashmir? What do you think about the outrageous stuff that's going on in Kashmir? And he was Trump was laughing. He was joking. He's like, are these your people? Are they part of your team? Where do you get these people? And I started bawling. I was like, he's absolutely right. I mean, these are like, come on, guys, like take the time to read the resolutions and ask some sensible questions that one can give an answer to. But the UN has refuted it. I think just as a global, internationally, they have been backed in a corner. Nobody takes their cause. No one agrees with them on this issue of Kashmir. I think the world overwhelmingly backs India on its decision. It's an internal matter. It can do what it likes. So I just wanted to share some of the false reporting that has been coming. It's stopped now because I think they realize that also there's been a lot of outrage, people writing in and saying this is false, and there's been a lot of, I think, counter reporting to that. So I think they kind of stopped that narrative that they thought it would catch on. It didn't. It actually kind of, New York Times is the worst with this, and Washington Post are really, really atrocious. And you see them spinning stories on all kinds of narratives, and I think their own credibility is gone down the toilet, especially after this. Like, I don't think any Indian or subcontinent person will ever read the New York Times because of such fake news that they kind of spread with relation to specific issues.